It was one of the most audacious ploys of the Second World War, a fake disease with no cure that saved dozens of Jews from the Nazis in occupied Rome. The fictitious disorder was known as Syndrome K and was treated in a hospital right under the noses of the Germans. This is the story of how a group of courageous doctors and nurses risked their lives to protect their fellow human beings from the horrors of the Holocaust. In September 1943, Italy surrendered to the Allies and declared war on Nazi Germany, but the Germans were not ready to give up their former ally. They quickly occupied most of the country, including the capital, Rome. There they began a ruthless campaign of persecution and deportation of the Jewish population, who had already suffered under the fascist regime of Benito Mussolini. On October 16, 1943, the Nazis launched a massive raid on the Jewish ghetto near the Tiber River. They rounded up more than 1,000 Jews, men, women and children, and loaded them onto trucks bound for the concentration camps. Only 16 of them would survive. But not all Jews were captured that day. Some managed to escape the raid and sought refuge in a nearby hospital, the Fatebenefratelli, located on a small island in the middle of the river. The hospital was run by a Catholic religious order, the Hospitaller Brothers of St. John of God, who had a tradition of helping the poor and the sick. The head of the hospital was Dr. Giovanni Borromeo, a man who had opposed fascism and refused to join the party. He had already hired several Jewish doctors who had lost their jobs because of the racial laws, and had sheltered many anti-fascist activists and Allied soldiers in his hospital. He was determined to do whatever he could to save the Jews from the Nazis. Among the Jewish doctors who worked at the hospital were Dr. Vittorio Sacerdoti, a young physician who had lost his parents and his uncle in the raid, and Dr. Adriano Ossicini, a psychiatrist and a member of the resistance. Together with Borromeo, they devised a brilliant plan to hide the Jews in the hospital and make them appear as patients. They invented a fake disease called Syndrome K and gave it a terrifying description. Syndrome K was a highly contagious and deadly illness that caused fever, delirium, convulsions, and horrible lesions on the skin. It had no known cure, and anyone who came in contact with it was doomed. The name Syndrome K was chosen as a mockery of the Nazi commanders, Kesselring and Kappler, who were responsible for the occupation and the deportation of the Jews. The doctors and the nurses assigned the Jews to a special ward, isolated from the rest of the hospital. They put up signs warning of the danger of Syndrome K and instructed the Jews to act as if they were in agony, coughing, moaning and writhing. They also smeared their faces and bodies with iodine and bandages to create the illusion of the lesions. They told the Jews that this was their only chance to survive and that they had to trust them and follow their instructions. The plan worked. The Nazis raided the hospital several times looking for Jews and partisans, but they never dared to enter the ward of Syndrome K. They were too afraid of catching the disease themselves and infecting their fellow soldiers. They believed the doctors' lies and left the hospital without further inspection. The hospital staff also managed to fool the local fascist authorities who were collaborating with the Nazis. They even convinced them to provide food and medicine for the fake patients, claiming that it was their duty to care for them, even if they were hopeless cases. The hospital staff kept up the charade for 9 months, until June 4, 1944, when Rome was liberated by the Allies. The Jews who had been hidden in the hospital were finally free and rejoiced with their saviors. They thanked the doctors and the nurses for their courage and their kindness and hugged them as brothers and sisters. The hospital staff had saved at least 45 Jews from certain death and possibly many more. They had also saved their own souls by defying the Nazis and their evil ideology. The story of Syndrome K remained a secret for many years until it was revealed by Dr. Ossicini in 2004. He and his colleagues had never sought any recognition or reward for their actions. They had acted out of a sense of duty and humanity and had considered themselves as ordinary people doing what was right. But their deeds were not forgotten. They were honored by the State of Israel, the Vatican, and various Jewish organizations as righteous among the nations, the highest distinction for those who had helped the Jews during the Holocaust. They were also praised by the survivors and their descendants, who kept in touch with them and their families. Dr. Borromeo died in 1961 Dr. Sacerdoti in 2006, and Dr. Osikini in 2017, at the age of 96. They left behind a legacy of heroism and compassion that inspires us to this day. The Fatebenefratelli Hospital still stands today on the same island in the Tiber River. It is still a place of healing and hope, where the spirit of Syndrome K lives on. On its wall, there is a plaque that commemorates the extraordinary feat of the hospital staff who saved the lives of the Jews with a fake disease. It reads, "In this hospital, the medical staff with wisdom and courage invented Syndrome K, a disease that did not exist, to save many Jews from deportation and death. Their example is a lesson of humanity and solidarity for future generations."